decided after 13 babies were abandoned in the Houston Metroplex area, we had to do something about it. Babies abandoned in trash cans, babies abandoned in parks, outside hotels. We knew we had a problem in the number of babies that were being abandoned by young people and others around our community.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. I'm David Gregory. That was Texas Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee talking about a new billboard campaign and law aimed at preventing child abandonment. She was speaking on the Today Show. The billboards that she mentioned, and Texas is not alone in dealing with the problem. More than 22,000 newborns are abandoned each year in hospitals alone, and that figure does not include infants left in other places like bathrooms and trash cans. There you go. That's Don't Abandon Your Baby. Those are the billboards in Houston. It has a phone number there. Take your child to an emergency medical technician at a fire station or hospital. The idea here is to try to persuade young mothers who are in a position of not wanting to care for the child, a 30-day window to give that child up to somebody who can care for the child and therefore avoid criminal prosecution, as was the case in Delaware. I'm taking your calls on this matter on the question of preventing baby abandonment. Who is responsible? Is it the government, in that case in Houston, being behind that billboard effort, being behind getting babies out of the hands of mothers who don't want to care for them, or is it the job of parents and the community at large? Our number, 888-MSNBC-USA, and we'll take your email too. Let me introduce to the program Alan Lipman. You've seen him here before, clinical psychologist at Georgetown University. Also here is Teresa Wagner from the Family Research Council. Welcome back to both of you. Alan, your response to this program, this effort to prevent child abandonment in this form is what?
Well, look, there's no defense to abandoning your child. It's a horrible thing to do, as we've already seen in the previous discussion about the Grossberg-Peterson case. But look, beyond culpability, which is important, and beyond making sure that kids are more responsible, which is an important part of preventing this, once this is going to happen, kids are going to have sex, and some of the time there's going to be this outcome. And we need to provide options for these kids. And this program, Texas Bill 3423, does that in a way that I think is reasonably narrowly tailored to the goal. These kids feel fear, they feel shame, they feel like they have no options. Of the 13 cases in Texas, we know most of them are poor, they're young kids, they don't know what to do. And when you get to this point in the road, when it hasn't been prevented through all of our best prevention efforts, we need some kind of options, and this bill, I think, is one way to provide them. It's not a bad idea. It's not a bad approach. I commend Representative Lee and Morrison on this.
Teresa, what do you say about this?
Well, the most obvious comment to make in this case and the cases discussed before is that our abortion culture and our abortion policy, which allows abortion for any reason up through and including delivery, teaches our young people that human infants are disposable and can be abandoned. After all, abortion is nothing but the destruction of the human infant in pregnancy. And of late, we have heard about an especially gruesome abortion method on infants who are very developed, which says to the public that destroying a human infant in utero is perfectly acceptable for the public's mind, to then say that destroying a human infant newly born, when you can destroy the infant
But Teresa, these are people who are making a choice. Look, maybe these are people who don't believe in abortion, and therefore they bring a child to term, and then they realize that they just can't do it, and then they're taking this action. So why are you making this simply about a permissiveness about abortion?
Right. The point is, David, that our culture in accepting abortion has decided that the human infant doesn't warrant legal protection. And for the public to say magically 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes after birth, the child does warrant protection, when 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes before birth, the child does not. The public just can't get a handle on that because it is nonsensical.
Teresa,
yes,
I think that you may be right about the culture, or you may be wrong. But it's a very broad step to go from abandoning a child to statements about a culture of murder. Look,
well,
hang on, Teresa. Let's assume that you're right. Let's assume that we are promoting a kind of culture in which
infant homicide is actually on the rise.
Teresa, let's let him finish.
it's still going to be the case that in a certain number of cases, kids are going to wind up in a situation where they aren't going to have a home, where certain kids are going to be vulnerable to abandonment. We can't close our eyes to that. We need to be able to provide reasonable options for that circumstance, and I really think that the Texas bill does that. It doesn't promote the culture of death that you are suggesting.
Right.
It merely provides a safety net for those situations in which it occurs by providing an affirmative defense for these mothers if they give their child to an EMT.
Well,
now,
I
it seems to
certainly
me that
agree.
even under those circumstances, Teresa, it really is a reasonable approach, even within your purview, taking your point of view.
All right, Teresa,
sure.
go ahead.
And I agree with all of that. We have no problem, actually, with this measure, except to the extent that it might advocate abortion. But let's not fool ourselves. The problem discussed today is the increasing frequency of infant homicide and the light sentencing of those people who commit it. And the abortion culture has everything to do with the acceptability of infant homicide.
Have you looked at the numbers in Texas?
Excuse me, if I can finish. The infant homicide rate has been on the rise. That's directly related to the acceptability of destroying infants. And the light sentences, not just in the Brian Peterson case, but in other infant homicide cases, reinforce.
Let me get in here because I want to get a phone call in, then I want to pose another question. Julie is on the line from Indiana, I believe. Julie, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead.
I totally agree with what the gal said. I am definitely pro-life, but abortion issue aside, we have taught our society that life is not precious, that we can kill an infant if it's not so much if it's disabled, but if it's a boy, if it's a girl, we can kill an old person if they're sick. And when you teach a society that life is no longer precious to anybody, then killing a child right after it's born means nothing to a lot of people. And that's what the lady was saying. It may not be an abortion issue. It's an issue that we have taught our children that life is not precious anymore, and it's our fault.
Cynthia, honestly, let me put it, because Cynthia and Jack are still with us. Cynthia, what happens, do you think, in the minds of young people who are keeping a secret, evidently, from parents? I mean, especially if they're teenagers.
They sure didn't look like me when I was pregnant. Nobody could.
Yeah, she was huge, David. When she sat around the house, she sat around the house.
But, I mean, first of all, how are parents kept out of the loop? And secondly, what's going on in a young woman's mind, particularly, where she's willing to bring it to term, and then all of a sudden she's freaking out and saying, you know, kids got to go, kids got to go.
Right. Well, I think there's two distinct cases that you could almost not talk about on the same television show. And one is somebody who bashes a kid's head in and puts it in a dumpster. And the other is somebody who's just looking to get rid of a kid because they cannot handle it, because they're going to take it to a church, or they're going to take it to a fire station or a hospital. Most of the abandonment cases in America are actually crack and drug-addicted mothers who just walk away from children in hospitals. And those cases really call out for drug treatment and social intervention. The criminal justice system isn't the answer in those cases, but certainly if you bash a kid's head in and treat it like meat, the criminal justice system is the only place to go.
But I think Cynthia makes a very important point to distinguish between those two types of cases.
All right, Jack, go ahead.
David, the one thing I wanted to say was, and Teresa, with all due respect, your organization or any pro-life organization should be promoting exactly what's going on in this Texas bill, namely immunizing the mother for choosing life. That is to say, the Texas bill says if within 30 days of birth you give the child to a hospital or an EMT or a fire station, you will not be prosecuted, or you'll have a complete defense to prosecution. Instead of increasing criminal penalties, you should be doing everything in your power to legislatively advocate for promoting life, and immunizing people does exactly that.
Absolutely. And we have no problem with this bill, as I said, except to the extent that it advocates abortion. But if I may, I do think that some of this discussion is missing the larger issue here, which is why we have unwanted pregnancies, promiscuity, and infants who are abandoned and destroyed in the first instance. What you have here, as the caller described, is not only a complete loss of the sense of how human life is sacred, but how human sexuality is special and sacred. Our culture now completely separates human sexuality from marriage and from children, such that our young people are in effect encouraged to have sexual relations without any preparation for the children who are conceived as a result.
All right, let me get in here and take a break. We'll come back with our guests and more of your phone calls on this matter, and the question of who's responsible for instilling those values into young people before it gets to a point where it's too late. And coming up a little bit later on, Chris Matthews from Hardball